Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, people of the world. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I feel like I'm going to call this a mini-series, not really, because it's one of my mini episodes, but this is in my Dean series, right? I'm trying to go through all the deans of George Mason University to really ask about their journeys within their disciplines as well as in their individual career journeys. But I have my second dean, so right now, I have the pleasure of having Dean Rick Davis, the Dean of the College of Visual and Performing Arts, affectionately known as CVPA, joining me for the podcast. And we're just going to have a great discussion about his career within the arts as well in academia. But before we get started, Dean Davis, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, first of all, please call me Rick.
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay. As you would outside this room, right?
Yeah.
I am primarily identified as a theater maker. Mm-hmm. I'm the dean of a wonderful arts college that has 7 artistic disciplines: art, dance, music, theater, film, game design, arts management. Did I get all 7? I think I did.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah. So I have to associate with and collaborate with artists of all kinds of different fields. But my home field is really theater, and I'm primarily a director. And also work as a dramaturge, which some of your listeners may not know that word.
I don't.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what a dramaturge is, and let me tell you, when I was working primarily as a dramaturge in my late 20s through my mid 30s, was a very dramaturgical part of my career. The most frequent question I ever got asked was, "What is a dramaturge?" So I became very adept at answering the question. Essentially, a dramaturge is someone who combines a theory and a practice. Mm-hmm. So it's like someone who knows, in theater terms, it's someone who knows the history and literature and criticism of the theater world, but also knows about putting on a production from a very practical, dirty hands kind of point of view. And that skill set is interesting because you can then be an advisor to the production. You might bring a little bit more of the history and theory into the rehearsal room. You might be adept at researching historical material, for example, or you might just know the tradition of the play that you're working on or the playwright. But at the same time, you're not a scholar who has no idea how a thing is actually done in the real world. And so it's a really nice kind of a bridge. And I've used that philosophy actually throughout my life without, first of all, knowing what the name was. Because I've always enjoyed equally thinking about things from a very academic, scholarly, literary point of view, and building scenery and hanging lights and singing and acting and directing plays. And so the dramaturgy is a way of kind of putting all those things together.
Well, I think, honestly, I would like to say maybe that I'm an adopted dramaturg because, I'm as I've getting my PhD in communication, yes, I'm learning a lot about theories and practice, but I also like to put it, I'm having this podcast, right?
Yeah,
and
this is a good example.
I definitely, we learn about the techniques of social media and all the history and all that stuff and researching how the audience feels, but I also want to be a practitioner. I like actually practicing more than theorizing because I like to do. I'm a very tactile person, so I'm so glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's a cool thing to think about, and I'll tell you how I got started in that. I was in college, and I was studying very intensively to be a scenic and lighting designer, so a very practical set of tools, and I was enjoying that work. But something started to occur to me on my own, and then I was given a major mentor moment, which I really appreciated. That's something I always want to shout out because this mentor moment actually changed my life. And actually, there are several of those that we may come to in the course of this. But I was hitting a plateau in my own development, especially in the scenic design area, because scenic design is a very fine art based medium
Yes.
You have to be able to draw, you have to be able to paint, you have to be able to nowadays use a computer. But in my day, it was T-squares and triangles and watercolor, and And I was quite frankly okay at that.
Skill set wise.
Yeah. Lighting was another thing. I still do lighting from time to time because I was able to master that a little bit better. But the scenic stuff, I was hitting a plateau and I was getting frustrated and I wasn't progressing. And, well, this professor at Lawrence University where I was studying, he was in his first year there, and he pulled me aside one day because he'd had me in class, and I think I might have been in a play that he directed. He pulled me aside and one day and he said, Rick, I think you might be a dramaturg. And, of course, I went, what?
He used that word.
He used that word.
Okay.
He used that word, and this is significant. He used that word in 1978.
Yeah.
When the profession of dramaturgy was just getting started in the American theater. It had been established in Europe for quite a while, but in terms of the American professional theater, it was a brand new thing. There were hardly any training programs for it. There were a lot of theaters that had never heard of it, but this guy came to us from the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, which was one of the first theaters in the country that ever employed dramaturgs, so he knew what that was.
Yeah.
And he recognized somehow that spark in me. And after I got finished saying, what? He explained what he knew about what a dramaturg does. And he said, just think about that. And because I was a junior, I think, over the next, what turned into 2 more years, because I was a 5-year student.
Hey, shout out to them. I was super senior too, so shout out to the super seniors.
And the 5th year was pretty good for me. I don't know about you. But
I was lonely. All my people bounced.
I know.
I was ready.
But I got a lot done my 5th year. Anyway, but Fred Gaines is this gentleman's name. He passed away just a few years ago, near and dear to my heart always, and for that insight and many other things as well. But I started researching it. I started looking into it and ended up going to grad school as a dramaturg in an early cohort. I started grad school in 1980 when the dramaturgy program that I attended at Yale Drama School was only 10 years old.
Right, so it was at Yale.
Yeah,
and it was a very new program. And new. So, when they think about newness and all that, amongst your classmates, was it like, oh, he's just going to keep on going to school? He can't,
right.
Let me rephrase, were they saying things like, oh, he couldn't hack it in the bit, in the show biz, he's going to study, because I heard a lot of times, for the, those that can't do teach, right? And that's a really terrible mindset to have, because I've met so many, also wonderful professors we have here that are really not that. They are practitioners, they're doers, they're amazing, and they have the skill set of teaching. And so I actually say they're more talented, but what was that like going back to that when you're in a new program, a new field, a new theory? How was that like explaining that to your peers or yourself or whatever?
It was a really insightful question because there were people at the Yale Drama School, which, was and is, an amazing training program. I won't get into rankings, but,
it was out there.
It's out there, yeah.
Yeah, what's his name? One dude from Living Color, David Allen Greer went there.
Oh, yeah. He was my classmate, actually.
Oh,
we were there at the same time, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we could go on, right?
Yes.
Name dropping, but I won't do that. You can drop names and check them, but I'm not going to do that.
No, that's crazy.
But it was a great cohort. But yes, there was some not skepticism is the wrong word, but some uncertainty even there about, well, now you're in my rehearsal. Why are you here? What are you doing here? And in a way that was okay because we had to earn our right to be in those rehearsals. We had to prove that we were useful. And I didn't mind that. First of all, and then this is a little true confession here, which if anybody in my immediate family is in the listening audience for this, they might not even know what I'm about to say. I had kind of a plan in mind in going into dramaturgy that I wanted to be a dramaturg because I was truly interested in it, but I also wanted to morph eventually into being a director.
Yeah.
And I thought then, and I continue to believe, that dramaturgy is, first of all, a great career in and of itself, but it's also the best preparation for being a director. And I had a long-range vision that someday, and I didn't know when, and I wasn't going to rush it, that if I pick up all these bits of knowledge and theory practice combination, working as a dramaturg, I'll be working with some great directors.
Yeah, you'll be in the spaces, you'll be in the rooms with
Yeah,
them.
yeah, and soaking up techniques and pros and cons and all that. And sure enough, that's what happened over the course of the next 15 years or so. And then anyway,
Well, I mean, honestly, I feel like this. I want to call this the life of a dramaturg because I think, the mindset of practitioner and research is just so powerful. Because think about, if you have context and knowledge and what the world views, but then you actually doing it, your decisions are informed by real research,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so, like, if you make good decisions, you're like, well, in context, how this audience views it, research has shown this and that, whatever. Or additionally, knowing context, like, if I want to do this play, but maybe this audience has a historical, history with it, right? That's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
against their culture.
Yeah.
That's probably like
Yep.
so having that could help you know when to like
Yeah, and
do what you need to do.
that exact point comes out in something else that dramaturgs do at most theaters where they are employed. They help with season planning. So checking, checking those kind of things against, here's a play we want to do. How does it really fit this community, right?
Yeah.
Or if we're going to do it, how do we need to contextualize it for this community? And I was lucky enough to work at a really wonderful theater up in Baltimore called Baltimore Center Stage, which was the major regional theater in that area, still is. It's a theater for audiences around the DMV. If you think of Arena Stage and the Shakespeare Theater, Center Stage is in that league of theater. It's slightly smaller, but it's actually in the same kind of stratum of professional theater. It's a very, very good company. And I was so lucky to work there for about 6 seasons. First as the dramaturg. I was their first dramaturg ever. I mean, first full-time dramaturg. They had hired some folks on a freelance basis, but I helped establish dramaturgy at that theater. And then I morphed, in my last year and a half there, I morphed into a title called Associate Artistic Director. And that's the role I held until I came to Mason in 1991.
So, I mean, I think, and I've seen this a lot with the arts, right? I used, industry advisor. That's how we got connected.
That's right.
My role. That, in the art world, a resume is more so like, how can you prove it, right? It's not like your resume needs to be like my job. But so how were you breaking in? How did you get into that world where it's not really based on the resume, it's mainly on relationships, having quote unquote a portfolio?
Yeah.
How did you break in after grad school?
Oh yeah, I can tell you've worked in the career area because that is the question, right?
Yeah.
And let me just digress for just a second and say you're absolutely right. Obviously, the resume is important, but what's really important is the impression you make when you walk into the room. As an actor, which I'm not primarily an actor, but I've done some acting. But I've cast hundreds of actors, right, from the other side of the table. We don't look when we're seeing an 8-hour day of auditions. We don't necessarily look at where you went to school.
Yeah.
We look at you.
Yeah.
And how did you convey your skill, your talent? How did you convey yourself? How did you handle the audition material? How did you handle adjustments that we asked you to do on the fly? Give a couple notes. How does the actor take it? And I sometimes say this is a little bit reductive, but it's true enough to say that I say I don't really look at where they trained until after I see them, and it doesn't matter to me where they trained unless I've got 2 actors that I just can't decide between. They're equal in every way, talent-wise, suitability-wise. Maybe I'll go with the one with the incredible academic pedigree.
Yeah.
Maybe,
Yeah.
but it's not a guarantee. For me, as a dramaturg, the degree probably meant a little bit more because it's kind of a quasi-academic position. You want to be, if you're going to hire a dramaturg, you want to be sure that they actually have read stuff.
Yeah. Research.
And the degree
Or wrote
proves
stuff
that.
too. Yeah.
Right, exactly, both. But I got my first dramaturgy job by careful relationship development with the artistic director of Center Stage at the time, a guy named Stan Vojevodsky. I was teaching full-time at first, at a beautiful little college called Washington College on the eastern shore of Maryland, in Chestertown, Maryland, which is just across the Chesapeake Bay from Baltimore.
Yeah.
And I knew that I loved teaching even then. I think I love it more now, but I loved being in the room with students some of whom were my age at that point.
Yeah.
But I also saw just across the bay, about an hour and 15 minutes away, was this fantastic regional theater that I respected, knew about. So I started going to shows. I started trying to meet people. I met a few people. I started writing letters. In those days, you would write letters, right? And I introduced myself to Stan over that, right? Then he came to see a show that I worked on in Pittsburgh at another theater. Didn't come to see my work. He came to see other things, but we met again, and it was, okay, this was good, And so over the course of about 2 years of this took about 2 years to
curate a relationship.
yeah. So but we did, and finally I wrote him a long letter. No, wait, out of order. After this 2 years, he actually got in touch with me and said, our theater is considering creating a part-time but continuing dramaturge position. So we're trying to get away from freelancers and we're trying to hire a staff person. How would you describe that position if you were to?
He wants you to draft the position.
Yes. So I did. I wrote a 4-page letter, typed, single-spaced, and
At the end you said, and the person that fills this is me.
Basically. And sure enough, and I put that in the mail, and I went off on my honeymoon and came back to a lovely message saying, come over and let's talk about this.
That's awesome.
And just that very spring, this was in the winter of 1985, and in that very spring of 86, I started.
That's crazy. It's kind of like that exercise, right? The dream job you want, and then you actually did.
Yeah.
So one of the things, though, that you made, and this is where you put the academic hat on, is like, well, then if I'm a college kid, I can say, okay, I just need to build up skills and relationships. Why do I need to go to a school to study, insert any creative discipline, art and visual technology? If I just get on my own computer, I can do this at home.
Yeah.
Dance, just go to my dance studio and dance on weekends and get those skills. So what would you say to someone to say, okay, but in addition, academic degree in creativity or in a creative field is a benefit?
Yeah. Okay. Oh boy, that's a big open door.
Yeah.
But I'm going to walk through it.
Yeah.
Number one is craft. Anything we do in the performing or visual arts is based on craft. And there are some people who are naturally gifted, and they already have a lot, but they still have to learn craft, right? They still have to learn process, and they need to refine their skills, right? And you can do that in an academic program if you find the right one. Second thing is what I would call insight. Nobody knows everything. Most of us don't know that much, right? And being around a cohort of students, being around good faculty, being around, and this is my commercial for the liberal arts, but being around other kinds of ideas that don't seem to be relevant right now, but might come into play later on in my own life. Directing the plays I've directed, I have become so interested in things like astronomy.
Yeah.
Because I've directed plays, about Galileo, right? Well, thank goodness I had a physics class, right, in college that I was required to take.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. And the basic understanding of, of basic physics, basic astronomy led me to be able to grapple with the things that were going on in that play so much more easily. Same with religion, same with history.
Yep. Shout out to history majors.
Yeah. I mean, that stuff is never going to go to waste if you have a career in the arts. Your artistic output is a Venn diagram of your talent and your skill, which are two different things, and your insight.
Yeah.
And to fill up that bank of insight, is what school is all about. And I love that about being even today, having been teaching now for all these years, this is such a cliche alert, okay, but I still feel like a student.
Yeah, me too.
Every single day.
Yeah.
'Cause I have to learn new stuff all the time, and students teach me new stuff all the time. And so I kind of feel like my bag of insight is getting refilled all the time, and that's so important. So there's every reason to.
Yeah, I was about to say one thing that kind of stood out too that you spoke upon. I don't know if that aligns with insight. Is just the social capital that you get from going to actual brick and mortar school.
Yeah.
Like just as easily, me and you could just stay at home, do a master class, virtual, learn all the craft on an online platform. But the fact that I can reference real people, my alum, fellow classmates, and it is cliche because they always say, stand up or look to your left and your right. Your classmates are people that you're going to be your future colleagues or
it's really true.
Your people in the field, right? And then the dance kids, they stay together and put each other on for jobs.
Yes, they do.
Or they wear that Mason. If you're wearing that Mason hat and you're at a studio, someone's like, oh, you went to Mason. So, I mean, I think that's going to be my biggest sell on going to college is that you can get that information anywhere. Information is very readily available.
Yep.
But it's the relationships and the in-person to person relationships that Mason or any institution yields. That is the selling point for going to college.
Yeah. And the other thing is, critical thinking, another great thing that we talk about here. I mean, that's a formal process, right? You learn to analyze data and ask questions about it and create original syntheses, right? All that sounds very academic. There's another kind of critical thinking, which is interpersonal critical thinking. And I think the only way you get that is in person. Yeah. I think even with as used to Zoom and everything else that we are, with as used to Khan Academy or other, sort of information download sort of sources, that's relatively passive. But here we are sitting in a room together, right? We could be doing the same interview 1,000 miles apart, and it would sound kind of the same. But I'm making eye contact, right? And you're nodding, or you're going, or you're taking, and I can see you taking notes. To me, that's how actual collaboration
100%.
happens. And in you try out an attitude, or you make a statement, and you can see immediately what's happening in the room with the other people. And I just think that's really, really important. And if you wanted to talk about directing plays as an example of this, I mean, we did a lot of theater during the pandemic.
Yep.
Some of it was excellent. Some of it was brilliant, in fact. But the most brilliant theater during the pandemic was theater about doing theater in the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was commentary on, because it was theater artists going, man, this is hard.
Bubble outside themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And when finally we were able to come back together, the feeling in the room, several rooms that I was part of, was like, oh my God,
That's what it feels like
we're
to
back.
hear a clap or
Yeah.
feel the audience clap.
And the audience was ecstatic.
Or
to come
hear
back.
people laugh, right? Like it's really hard to be funny over Zoom.
Yep.
You're like, oh, I don't know if I'm hitting or not.
No,
like,
exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
Yeah. So like you have, I mean, I'm going to go with a strong assumption that the journey to a PhD or doctorate in the arts is not as, I'm not saying it's hard, it's not as common. I think a lot of people think when they think of doctorates or PhDs, they probably go straight to a scientist or some other discipline. So during that journey, when was it the spark for you to keep going and after the master's and get a doctorate?
Are you like clairvoyant or something?
No, I'm just really good at interviewing people. No, I've been doing this for a while. I write down notes.
Because I have a weird story. So I got my MFA at Yale in 1983, and MFA is a terminal degree, right? So you can do anything. You
could teach at an MFA, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't necessarily want to teach right away, but it turns out I found a job teaching, so I did that in 1983. Got a job. This is a job at Washington College, and at the same time, you were talking about cohorts. A group of us at Yale, the third-year class, which included dramaturgs, directors, actors, managers, designers. A bunch of us got together, like actually during the end of our second year, and said, we want to start a theater together when we graduate.
Oh, snap. Okay.
So we worked.
Let's get the band together.
It was like getting a band together. Yeah. We worked every week during our third year. We did all our productions, did all our classwork, but every week, a group of us, different groups sometimes, met and planned this theater and started to raise money for it the old-fashioned way, writing letters to people.
Fundraising, straight
Yep,
up.
just
Grassroots fundraising.
grassroots. And we raised enough money in those days. We raised about, I don't know, $7,000 or $8,000.
Big time.
And that was enough to get started. We didn't know how far we would go, but so we had this theater called the American Ibsen Theater. It was in Pittsburgh. We rented a space from a local college. We hired a lot of our folks from Yale to come, and others too, folks from Pittsburgh and folks from around. And we put on a season of plays, and then we did it another 3 years running.
And that's the one that the gentleman came and watched you, right?
Yeah,
Was in Pittsburgh.
That's exactly right.
Wow. Okay.
So I mean, and we ended up creating some work that was actually pretty notorious. I almost said notorious.
Yeah.
Actually, a couple of them were notorious, but we actually ended up doing some work that got some attention nationally, and it was great fun. And then we ran out of money and
That's life.
and closed it after 3 years. But anyway, the point is that was a cohort-based project, and I was sort of paying for my share of it by teaching during the year,
Yeah.
and kind of keeping both ends together. So I'm not sure where I was going with that.
You're
answer.
going with like how it went to like straight get your PhD. But,
yeah.
But
Yeah.
also just a real quick insight. Once again, this reiterates that the relationships you built in academia,
Yeah.
that was the moneymaker.
Yes.
Going to Yale for your Dramaturge program was, yes, the real value add that you got out of it wasn't like this degree that says Yale, was that you got a group of people from a cohort. So
Yep.
that's it's just reiterating that fact.
No,
But yeah.
exactly right. So the doctorate that I have is a DFA, Doctor of Fine Arts,
Yes.
which is a dissertation-based degree. It's like a PhD in
Yeah.
most ways. The MFA at Yale was a 3-year program, so I had all the coursework already, ready to go. I had to pass comprehensive qualifying exams, which I did. And the idea, in Yale's mind, for what that's worth, is that you work for a year or two, and then you finish your dissertation, and then you get your DFA.
All right. So you already did the coursework.
Yeah, the
via
coursework was
them.
done for the MFA.
And,
Right?
and you already like have real life experiences. So they built this program saying, okay, now you're just going to do something research based.
That's right.
So what was your project? and what was your topic?
My first project was on Ibsen, because we were doing this Ibsen theater, and I was totally immersed in Ibsen all the time. So I did some work on that, and then I got busy and put it aside for a while. And then I thought, I'm getting bored with it. No, that's wrong. I'm never bored with Ibsen, but as a scholar, I wasn't
Yeah.
that into it. So I had this other subject, 18th century English drama. I sort of fallen in love with that. So I started working on that, and I asked my faculty advisors, can I switch topics? They said, yeah, this is fine. And I got bored with that.
Okay.
And then I got real busy at Center Stage and then here at Mason, and I just kept putting it off. And we're talking now 1983,
Yeah. That's right.
right? So and every like 3 to 5 years, I would write to my Yale faculty, and I'd say, can I still work on this DFA? Or are you going to terminate me? Because sometimes programs will kick you out if you don't finish in a certain time frame. And they said, well, as long as you keep sending in new topics, we'll.
Yeah. Or maybe they also say, as long as you give us your check too. It's
Well,
like
fortunately, that was not on the table. Yeah.
Yeah. As long as you still pay tuition or
Yeah,
something.
no, I didn't have to like register for like a course.
class.
No,
Okay.
it's
Okay.
totally,
Yeah.
totally off the
Shout
books.
out. Yeah.
But the faculty changed, and I was working now professionally as a dramaturg, and I was like working with some of the new faculty who were also professional dramaturgs, so we knew each other as colleagues, and I kind of kept that string going.
Yep.
And finally, in the year 2001, 2002 maybe, right around then, I wrote to or called, I guess even emailed at that point, a guy named Mark Bly, who was a good friend. He had been at Arena Stage here, and he was the head of the dramaturgy program at Yale at the time. And I said, look, Mark, I want to get this DFA, but I will never do it unless you give me an up or out deadline.
Oh, he was like, put the pressure on me.
Yeah.
Build the accountability on me. I like
Exactly.
that.
So I said, let's you and I set a deadline, and if I don't finish by that time, I'm never going to do it.
Yeah.
And I put that on myself, and he agreed to it,
Yeah.
and it worked. So in 2003,
Boom. Done.
I finished the DFA, and the topic, I finally ended up with a topic that I really loved and have still continued working on, and that's translating Spanish Golden Age drama from the 17th century.
Wow. That's very niche.
It's pretty niche, but I had pretty good Spanish, and I had been, and this is the real hook. This is another true confession. I had been asked by a small theater in Baltimore, which doesn't exist anymore, but they were really fun while they lasted, to translate a Spanish play that they were interested in, and they didn't like any of the existing translations. So they came to me knowing that I did Spanish, and would you be interested in doing a new translation of this play? And I said, oh yeah, let's try that. I loved doing it. I loved what they did with the production. So I knew that there was like a market for this kind of work if you played it right. So I ended up translating 3 plays by Calderón de la Barca, great 17th century Spanish playwright, writing a substantial historical critical introduction. So it actually is a book-length study. And in May 2003, received the DFA. So it was a 20-year journey, which is very unusual, and I don't recommend it to anyone out there, but it actually worked out perfectly for me.
I love it. You give me some motivation, even though I heard 10 years is my cap for PhD here, so I got 10. So I'll probably take up the whole time. So, when did the transition from teaching in academia to academic leadership? Obviously, for those that don't know, being a dean is a leadership position, kind of further away from the instruction. So when was that journey started, and how did that transpire?
Yeah, it started through a series of emergencies.
Okay.
And this is another story that goes back a ways. But at George Mason, the arts programs that we now know came into being as a result of what I have come to call the Big Bang.
Yeah.
There was a Big Bang in 1990.
Okay.
And the Big Bang had 2 major components in it. One was we opened the Center for the Arts in 1990.
The actual building.
Concert hall,
Concert hall, okay.
Building opened in 1990.
That makes sense.
And the other thing that happened was the university created something called the Institute of the Arts, IOA for short.
Okay.
And at the time, that included just dance and theater and art. Music was over in College of Arts and Sciences and stayed there for a while. But the idea behind the Institute of the Arts and the concert hall was to bring professional artists onto campus.
Yeah.
And see if we could figure out a way to teach students in ways that may not be traditional academic ivory tower ways. So I was part of that wave. It came in 1991 from Baltimore, from Center Stage. Many other faculty, a couple folks who fit that description were already here, but other people came. Patricia Miller, who's still here, in the Opera and Vocal Studies program. When she came just a few months before I did, she was in the height of a fantastic career as an international mezzo-soprano on the opera stage and in the great concert halls of the world. But she found a way to come here and be full-time and still keep singing, right?
Keep singing, okay.
And I could give you many other examples, but the idea was, let's bring artists in off the street and put them in front of students and say, here, let's teach and see how you do. And if it doesn't work, no harm, no foul, see you later. But then coupling that with this major new performing arts center that allowed us to bring in, dance and theater and music.
Space, actual venue space.
And so those two things together created this incredible upsurge in artistic energy at Mason.
Right.
So how does that involve my journey to
They needed someone to lead that new school.
Well, yeah, that was a ways away yet. In 1999, the Institute of the Arts had a leadership change, and the new leader came in. 1996 it had a leadership change. The new leader came in, didn't stay very long, and then there was an interim leader who was a gentleman from the faculty, wonderful music professor named Joe Shirk. He passed on, and actually that's part of this story because he was leading the Institute of the Arts, and he got ill and passed fairly quickly. It was a sudden onset. So we had an emergency vacancy at the top in the summer of 2000. And I was off campus. I was in Arizona directing a play.
Yeah.
And Peter Stearns, the provost at the time, called me up in Arizona and said, hey, can you come back to Fairfax and talk to me because we got a problem. So I was literally parachuted into a leadership position in the fall of 2000
Right.
with to basically fill a vacancy that had been created by a resignation and a death.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
it was
You learn trial by
yeah,
fire.
it was trial by fire.
Well, I was also, but then I'm dating back. Then I bet that was also big motivation for you to get this doctorate.
Yes, it was.
She's like, maybe let me lead by example. I want to be credentialed with this doctorate if I'm
Yes, it
the
was.
lead of that.
Yep. So Peter Stearns and I talked about that actually during those moments. Well, then it was a lucky time in so many ways because what was to become the College of Visual and Performing Arts was just in the process of being developed.
Yep.
So as the interim director, dean kind of position of the institute, I was tasked with leading the development of the college, and then sort of said, well, I'm not sure I'm really ready to be the dean of this new college, so let me stand back and see what happens. And I told Peter, look, I'm not necessarily your founding dean, but if the pool doesn't materialize, let me know because I'm kind of enjoying this. And well, turns out we got a great dean. The founding dean came from outside, a guy named Bill Reeder, who became a mentor to me.
Bill Reeder.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was the first dean of CVPA.
Okay, I met him in arts management out there in Arlington.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shout out to him. I met him before. He's
former opera singer, former arts manager up in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Very interesting guy. Very non-traditional. Not an academic person at all.
Yeah,
right?
he's cool. I like him.
And so that was a really interesting choice, and I became his associate dean.
To get that to be under his wing.
Yep.
Yeah, I like it.
And for the next 14 years, we worked very, very closely together. And I had my little detour into the provost's office from 2007 to 2011, working directly with Peter on, my title was associate provost for undergrad, so the same position that Keith Renshaw has today.
Okay.
Was my role for about 4.5 years. And that was so great because, first of all, I think Peter Stearns is a world-class historian, professor, but also provost, and it was wonderful to work for him.
This sounds so bad, but now, is that why we had the Stearns Center?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Like, I love, like, the fact that, like, we have these buildings all around. I'm like, okay, that's history. Like, cool. Like, he left his part.
Yeah.
Johnson Center named after Johnson, all this stuff.
Yep.
So, I think you said it. The school has transformed. It used to be called, the Institute of Arts. The school's blown up. You said 7 disciplines. When it become really CVPA and they started adding more disciplines to this to grow, was that just kind of concurrent with the Final Four and the growth of the university?
It was around that time, not directly related, but the university was taken off.
Yes.
Right? I'm a proud dean, right? I post on my social media PDM sometimes, proud dean moment, because there's so much happening that I just love to signal that way. But as fast as George Mason has grown, the arts have grown faster.
Yeah, I can see.
For this whole time, since 1990, since the Big Bang, we have grown 425% in enrollment.
Yeah.
Which is astonishing, because that isn't happening everywhere in the country. I mean, arts programs are not always the growth points, right?
Yeah.
But we have been, partly because of the quality of the core values of the faculty that we have, but also because we keep adding programs too, and that's a good way to grow. So, for example, computer game design, film and video studies, arts management, which was Bill's big idea. Those first 2 programs, which have undergrad populations that they could grow a lot more if we had space for them. But those are great programs.
And it's intersections of technology and art. So I think that's why it's growing so much too. Arts and visual technology, film. I used to work with these students so much, so they really get those theories and all that, but they're going to get the concrete. Like, we're in a studio right now. Also the equipment, how to do that. So those programs are probably going to grow exponentially.
In the School of Art, you've got graphic design, which is the fastest growing program. Well, at one point, it was the fastest growing program in the whole university. And it's a great program. And that's so tech heavy now, because you're learning all that stuff with computer imaging. And then some of that's transferable into like 3D work and animation. And we teach all that.
Or UX design.
Yeah, we teach virtual reality, augmented reality.
Yes.
It's
it's growing.
Yeah.
And then, like, obviously venue space is growing too because there's a Hylton Center. Like, what was the rationale to have more than one arts facility? Because, obviously we have really, I mean, I had the gentleman, Eric Cumbersome. He's like the manager for Eagle Bank. He's
Yeah.
like, man, that venue gets sold out all the time.
Yep.
We got to probably, I know the Center of the Arts is really a hub for artistic. So what was the rationale to build a whole another thing out there in Hylton?
Yeah,
Hylton.
the rationale for building what became known as the Hylton Center, it started life as the Community Performing Arts Center before we had the naming gift from the Hylton Family Foundation. And by the way, for your listeners, that's Hylton.
Yeah,
Not the hotel chain.
Yes.
But a local developer who's made a wonderful life in Prince William County and is leaving something behind. Right. The reason we got into that project was quite literally to serve a need in that community.
An arts need.
Yeah, arts and culture for Prince William County and City of Manassas, and it's a great story. Here's the brief version of it. In the 1990s, Prince William County and the City of Manassas were not getting along all that well, which is not atypical for cities and counties that are in a relationship where you're fighting over traffic, you're fighting over police and fire services, you're fighting over boundary jurisdictions, tax base, all these things. And the mayor of the city of Manassas and the county board chair of Prince William County would seem to be polar opposites. Marvin Gillum was the mayor of Manassas, like umpteenth generation Virginian, World War II vet, conservative Republican. Kathleen Seefelt.
Oh, I heard that name before.
Yeah. You might have driven on the Kathleen Seefelt Parkway out in there. Kathleen Seefelt, who was the chair of the county board, liberal Democrat from northern Minnesota, transplant to Prince William County, which itself is kind of like suspect, right, for some of the old-time folks.
Yeah.
They loved each other. They worked so well together, and they were polar opposites, seemingly polar opposites, but they came together on a vision for what Prince William County and Manassas should become. And that vision included a university campus, which didn't exist until 1997, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it included the Freedom and Aquatic Fitness Center as a place for the community to come together and
Exercise.
get healthy, right? And it included an art center.
Because arts is part of the community's value.
Absolutely. So George Mason, being a good community partner, I think that's one of the great things about our university is that we do really try to meet the needs of the communities that we serve. Well, this community really wanted an arts center, and so George Mason partnered with the county and the city. County put down 60% of the initial capital cost. City put down 10%. It's a small city. University put down 30%. And ever since then, we've managed it. George Mason owns it now and manages it, but it's on behalf of the citizens of that region. And it's a beautiful theater. I mean, we designed it to be beautiful so that it would be like a symbol of the new Prince William and Manassas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I need to check it out. I've never been to. I've only.
Did you hear that audible intake of breath?
Yeah. I've been to a bunch of shows, and I've been in the Center of Arts multiple times.
I've seen you there,
but I've never been in a show. So, shout out! I need to go. I need to go to at least one show, expose myself. I've seen it. I've been in the Manassas campus.
Yeah, it's a beautiful theater.
I've never even gone inside.
And I'll tell you something again. If your listeners are in the local region. Merchant Hall, it has two theaters in it. Merchant Hall is the bigger of the two, 1,200 seats, shaped like an Italian opera house but smaller. It has the best acoustics of any theater for probably 100 miles around, and I'm talking about all the major theaters in the DMV. Merchant Hall has gorgeous acoustics. You can hear everything, and it's got this beautiful resonance to it that's just magical. So come here, a concert or a play. Can't go wrong.
And then, like I said, the community's using it. The students use it. Our student shows are out there. Community shows are out there. And that's really important, too, for us as a university to have, students that can say, I performed at a top-notch facility.
Oh, it's so much fun.
Place.
When I watch the like, for example, when the student opera productions, they don't all go out there, or the student dance concert, goes out there sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah.
But I watch these students walk onto that stage for the first time, and their eyes just get huge
because they feel like they made it.
Yeah, it's so pretty.
I bet that's a big deal, to see on the other end.
Yep.
So, this has been great. I really love talking to you. This is the part of the show I kind of made it up. Shot for shot. You get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you any random question. You want to go first? I go first.
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay.
Where do you want to be in 5 years?
Sheesh. So this is funny. Okay, career or personally?
Let's go career.
I don't know. I mean,
Is that going to get you in trouble?
no, it's not. I mean, I think. Let me say professionally. I think though I would say professional / academics. I don't see myself finishing this PhD in 5 years, but I do feel like I will progress further along in my discipline. Also understand that I would be comfortable considering doing research and being able to speak that language of quantitative and qualitative and just, have practice. Like I got a Mari grant, so I'm using my first time using Quatrix and
Nice.
just feeling like I can be in rooms with scholars and not say I'm done yet, but also feel confidence. Like I never thought if I blinked that I would be in a PhD program.
That's fantastic.
Or that the possibility of me being Dr. Phil the Black One.
Oh, that'll be great.
But also, I think, and I would say professionally, building my leadership skills. And so, I don't think necessarily it has to be a title at Mason, but within like associations. Like I'm a member of Eastern ACE, the Eastern Association of Colleges and Employers. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. All these service. I'm also very active in the community in regards to local politics, like Fairfax County stuff. I want to be able to have roles where they build my leadership skills, whether it's a board member or a president or something like that, because I think that just one, it gets me to be impactful in a community that I live, but also build up those skills that are outside, like delegation and leadership and being comfortable talking. So in 5 years, I will have more presidential roles in my belt. I'll have more community involvement in my belt and all those things. But honestly, I was really not even, you said professionally, I was like, hopefully he was going to say personally, because
go ahead.
No, because in my mind, the funny thing in the 5 years, I wasn't even really thinking about myself professionally. I was thinking about like, where are my boys going to be at? And my wife, 5 years, I'm thinking like, one of them is going to be like a teenager. And so I'm really thinking like, do I have to like, he's going to go to all his events and making sure that I pour into him. He just got he got the clarinet.
Okay.
So he wants to play the clarinet. Thank
Fantastic.
God. I was tired of hearing that recorder, but he wants to play the
listen.
clarinet. He's super smart. He likes to play sports. He's like this Renaissance man. And my other son, Miles, is a.k.a. going to be the mayor of Mason one day.
Oh, fantastic.
But I really thought about them more. I thought about where I was going to be as a father in 5 years, or a husband, and celebrating 15 years of
Those
marriage.
are beautiful thoughts.
So that was my.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was thinking about like, well, I'll still be in my house in 5 years. So I don't know. It's funny when you ask that question. As I said earlier, my mind did not go to me individually as a career. It was like, where is our family going to be at in 5 years? And that's I think that kind of informs that. That's my leading.
Yeah, I'm glad you covered both.
That's how I lead, I guess.
And by the way, I used to play clarinet quite often.
Okay.
But I still have a recorder in my office. So if you ever get hungry for hearing somebody play the
thank
recorder.
you. No, that recorder, please, I don't want to hear that no more. But shout out to my son, Bennett. I'm glad that you want to do the clarinet. So my question for you, how do you make time to still be a lover of the arts and enjoy the arts for yourself? And how do you give time to all those different ones that we just like dance?
Oh, yeah.
So that was my question. How do you still get to enjoy the arts for yourself?
Thank you. For one thing, Mason makes it easy because we have so much stuff going on here on every level, from the student to the top professional. I mean, I can go in a given month.
Yep.
I can go hear the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra, one of the greatest orchestras in the world, on our concert hall stage with an amazing young soloist. And then the next week I can go see a student-directed theater production, right? And then 2 weeks later I can go see a dance company production, right? And that's something Mason has just made available to me, but to everybody. I mean, that's the cool thing, right? And so my artistic hunger can be fed. But then I also make sure, and this is, I think, important to remember also, I make sure that I get off campus and see things in New York, or see things at the Kennedy Center, or see things in Philadelphia. I just spent a few days in Philly seeing some amazing things, both art and music, because you want to have your context.
Yes.
You don't want to get insulated
to one community's art.
Yeah, because then you start making your own standards, and you never know if you're really living up to the field, right? So it's that kind of mix. But then the other thing I would say is I also try to stay active as a creative artist,
Yep.
directing, writing, and I think if I ever felt like I couldn't do that anymore, I would also quietly fade away from the academy, because
Yeah.
I think I came here as a practitioner.
Yeah.
I want to stay here as a
practitioner,
practitioner
yeah.
and not get those juices stopped.
I love it. And so maybe just in regards to the busy schedule that a dean has, how do you show love to all these different art students in different ways? Like, you just map out their shows for the semester and say, I'm gonna try to at least go to at least one dance thing for the dance students and all
I
that.
I see something in every program for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I make that an absolute pledge. Usually more than one thing, but for sure.
Yeah.
That's a commitment.
Yeah.
And I try to encourage my colleagues to do. I know everybody's busy, right?
Yeah.
And we all have our favorite things. But I said, man, if you take CVPA as a whole, it is such a dynamic, diverse, amazing community. And the only way to experience that is to go over to the Gillespie Gallery in the School of Art and see the exhibition, right? You pop into Harris Theater and catch a recital, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Watch one of the films that the students make.
Oh,
the
the
short.
screenings are amazing.
Yeah,
You
shout
know,
out to them.
they're winning like regional Emmys. It's like
Yeah. You remember Taj? Remember
yeah,
him?
of course,
I was like, he made a movie, like
Yep.
a legit. I was like, dang, Taj winning
absolutely.
Sundance kid movie. I was like, man, this dude doing it. So, shout out to you, Taj. This has been great. I definitely enjoyed this. I thank you so much. I learned so much. I feel like this podcast for me is always an archive of learning more about the community I live in. I literally did not put it together that Peter Stearns is the Stearns Center.
Oh, I love it.
So,
I
hey,
love it.
blame my mind, not my heart. This is the part of the show called Shout Outs and Plugs.
Okay.
So you get to show love to anyone you want to show love to. And then plugs. These are the things that you want. I'll make sure to put in the show notes that you want the listeners to be aware of so that they can follow up. So shout outs and plugs.
Yeah. So real quick shout outs. Actually, one of the names we've already heard, and that's Peter Stearns, who is in every way a mentor and one of the smartest people I've ever met, but also one of the most grounded, one of the most humble, one of the most approachable. I wouldn't be here probably right now if I hadn't met him, and I wouldn't be in the role I am for sure. So I want to shout out to Peter Stearns, and I want to shout out the late Sarah Lawless, who was the founder of the first director of the Institute of the Arts and the person who hired me out of Baltimore in 1991. She was another unique individual. She was playing the role of a dean at a university in the arts with a degree that was a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry.
Oh, smart. I love it.
But she had an incredible career as an arts manager at some of America's greatest theaters. And that was the George Mason way at that time. Your degree doesn't prepare you for this, but your life prepared you.
Yeah.
So she saw that, and she lived that. And she was so amazing and innovative and fun. And she really helped us become the place that we are today. So Peter and Sarah would be two big shout outs.
Awesome. And then plugs, things that you want the listeners to be aware of, resources, I don't know, whatever.
So to pick up this theme that we just started on a minute ago, in the College of Visual and Performing Arts, we cover the waterfront as far as disciplines, as far as forms of expression. On any given week, and quite literally on any given week in CVPA, whether it's on the Fairfax campus, the Arlington campus, or the SciTech campus, you can see a great art show. You can see one or two or three great musical events. Depending on the week, you can see a theater event or a dance event. Those aren't every week because they take a little more time to, produce the tech and stuff. But throughout the semester, you'll be able to see several of each. You'll be able to see films, every week, and then in either guest filmmakers in the Visiting Filmmaker series or student productions. And then at the end of the semester, there's the festival, the Best of Mason Festival, and the student, and that's, several days consecutive of student screenings. So it's just amazing. You just, all you have to do is pick up the website, and say, what do I want to see this week? And I just encourage people to do that because I'll offer this as a final thought, unless you have more questions, and I'm happy to answer them. But we've developed this 4-word elevator speech over the last couple of years, and the 4 words are: the arts create community. Mm-hmm. The arts create community. And I just can't think of any work that I can do that's more important than that. Creating community, making temporary communities that come together just for a couple hours, or larger communities that come together for weeks, or ultimately, hopefully, really create a sense of the community around you all the time.
Yeah.
And the arts help give people ways in to become closer to each other, to open up to each other, to imagine each other's lives. And that's really what it's about.
I think that was a good note to note. I think I was going to say Life of a Dramaturge, but I feel like the arts create communities, the best title. That just sounds so powerful. I got chills with that because it's like, that's true, like sports and all that, but like you come to something, you have a shared community, you have a shared experience. I think that's what always.
It's a shared experience.
I think that's what they say about theater, right? Is that regardless of what's going out in the world, in this space right now, we're sharing an experience. And sometimes the actors say when they do that 360 thing, like, we're here together.
Yep.
And I was like, I felt that. I need to get my culture up, man. You got me going. I got to go at least one more show. Positive Filter listeners, this has been a great episode, and please, support George Mason and the College of Visual and Performing Arts. There's just so many amazing things that are going on. If you like this episode, please share it with a family member and friend. Additionally, as you know, every episode is dedicated to the memory of my late father-in-law, Jeff Kirsch. So please consider donating to the Jeff Kirsch Anti-Hunger Fund. Additionally, as the Prince of Positivity, if you're affiliated with the Mason Nation, please consider sending a Pats for Patriots to your fellow Mason affiliated friend, staff member, just to uplift their day. So I'll put that in the show notes. But this has been a great time. Thank you so much, and we're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends, and like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.